Okay, so Alice in Wonderland, a summary. I feel very qualified to do this because I have slight trouble sleeping, and this is a book that I listened to, not the movie. I'm not talking about the movie. I'm summarizing the book, and I listen to this almost every single night, so I am very qualified. Incredibly qualified, maybe too qualified.
You are pathetic.
To do this. But basically, there's this girl named Alice, and she's sitting beside her sister on like a bench. And then she's wondering, is making a daisy chain worth the bother of getting up and picking all of the daisies? And then the white rabbit comes along. And she obviously she sees the white rabbit. But this white rabbit has a waistcoat pocket and a watch to take out of it. And then he just like hops off. And Alice is like, "What? Excuse me?" So she runs after it, and she falls into this hole, and she's falling for so long. And she's like, "Oh my, what longitude and latitude am I at?" She was proud of herself for knowing those words, but she's like, "What longitude and latitude am I at? Am I gonna fall straight right through the world? Am I gonna meet the people that walk on their heads?" And she thought that the people, well, first off, she thought there were people that walk on their heads. And second off, she thought they were named the antipathies. I don't know what an antipathy is. I'm just hoping that it's not some sort of slur that I'm saying multiple times. And if it is, I'm sorry. But she falls, and finally she comes to a stop, and she like, ouch, you know? I'm pretty sure she like falls on leaves or something, or twigs. And then she's in this hallway, and she's like, "What is this?" And it's this hallway of doors, and she tries all of the doors, but none of them open. And she's walking back. Then she finds this curtain, and behind the curtain there is this tiny door, but she's way too big to fit through the tiny door. So she's looking around, and then she finds this glass table. It's got a key on it. And so she takes the key and she opens the door. No, wait. She found the key before she looked at any of the doors, and she tried the key on all the doors. But now she's trying the key on this little door, and it works. And she looks in there, and she sees this beautiful garden. Beautiful. But she's way too big to fit into it. So she goes back to the table, and she finds this bottle that says, "Drink me." And she's wondering, is this gonna be poisonous? But she drinks it anyway. Like, great role modeling, Alice. But she drinks it, and she gets smaller. And she's like, "Oh my, I can fit into this door now." So she runs over to the door, but it's closed. And then she runs back to the table, but like it's glass, and it's way too smooth for her to run back up or like climb up this table. So she's sitting there upset, and then she finds a cake that has "Eat Me" spelled on it in little currants. And she eats the cake. Like, was she not worried about getting poisoned or like ending up like Goldilocks and the Three Bears? What is you doing? But then she gets really, really big. She's like 9 feet tall. But she can reach the key, but she's way too big to get into the door. What I feel like she just does not think ahead. But anyway, she starts bawling her eyes out. And then she sees the little white gloves and the fan that the rabbit had. Oh yeah, the rabbit had little white gloves and a fan. And she's like crying and talking about how her feet are so far away and that she'll have to send them presents. And she's like, who's gonna put your boots on now? What? But she's crying and waving this fan, and then she realizes that she's put on one of the little gloves. And then she realizes that it's the fan that's making her shrink, because she's shrinking. And so she drops the fan, but she slips, and she's in a pool of tears. So she's wading around in this pool, and she finds a mouse. How does she not notice these things? Like, Alice is kind of dumb. I'm sorry, but she is. But she talks to the mouse, and she's like, what if it's a French mouse? And she says, you are a cat, in French. And this mouse just like loses it and starts to swim away so fast. And she's like, no, mouse, no. And then the mouse is like, okay, I'll tell you my story, but let's get dry first. And so they find land, and there's a bunch of other animals, like rodents and birds. And then they're just like, they start talking to each other. Did Alice's parents never teach her stranger danger? Like, her big sister really just... They never taught her stranger danger, because she's talking to these animals like she knows them. And I bet she's giving out personal information, social security number, bank information, like she's giving out her address. I just know that's what she's doing. But the dodo bird is like, let's have a caucus race. And then they have a caucus race. And then eventually the mouse is like, oh, I'll tell you my tale now, after they get dry. But then they make the mouse upset, so the mouse leaves. Ooh. And then Alice says something about her cat, Dinah, and then everybody is out of there. Out, gone. They're like, what? Woo! You know, they're gone. But anyway, she's so upset. And then the white rabbit comes back and is like, Marianne, what are you doing? Get me my gloves and my fan right now. And so she just goes off and gets it. And then she ends up like breaking the white rabbit's house. She gets really big. She like eats something, and her arm is out the window, and she like kicks Bill like a rocket. And it's just, this girl is a mess. Like, where is her parents? Where are they? Like, she's a mess. But she ends up playing with this dog, and the dog almost tramples her. Then she finds, wait, yeah, no, yeah. Then she finds this caterpillar. And the caterpillar is smoking from a hookah. And she's like, sir, I am not myself. And the caterpillar makes her recite a bunch of stuff. And he's like, no, that's not right. And eventually, Like, he's walking away, and Alice is like, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, one side will make you taller, and one side will make you shorter. And then she figures out that it's sides of the mushroom. So she picks off 2 sides of the mushroom, and she eats one, and she almost like breaks her neck because it's pressing so hard against her feet. So she eats the other one, and then her neck gets so long, she goes up through the trees, and her neck is so long that she has to slither down like a serpent. And there's this bird that like flaps in her face, and it's like, serpent, serpent. And this bird is just a stressed out mother. Where I'm not going to talk bad about the bird. The bird is stressed out trying to keep her eggs safe. So Birdie was doing whatever. Birdie's a good mama. But Alice eventually gets her neck back down and then gets herself back to her regular height. And then she finds this house. And there is these 2 footmen in livery. I don't know what livery is, but I can just imagine that they're dressed in like suits made out of liver. I don't know what that would look like, but that's what I imagine they look like. Ooh, this is a stressful story. And one of them looks like a fish, and the other one looks like a frog. And one is like, for the Duchess. No. From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet. And then the other one is like, for the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet. And then they both bow, and apparently they have really curly hair, and then their hair gets tangled up together. And Alice almost loses it over this. She's like bawling, laughing so hard that she's like, she's gonna bust something if she was laughing any harder. So she goes back into the trees for a second to calm down. Like, baby, she needed to calm down. And then she comes back out, and it's just the frog footman. And she's like, how do I get into this house? And this footman is a whole philosopher. He's like, well, you could get in and I could knock and you would let me out. And he's just but eventually he's like, you're making such a noise inside, they wouldn't even hear if you knocked. And in there is just so loud. There's banging and crashing, and the door is open. I don't know how it opens up, but a plate comes flying out and almost like takes off this footman's head. And he's like, oh, I'll sit here on and off for days and days. And it's just, what are you doing, man? But Alice goes into the house, and there's the Duchess and her baby. And there's the chef who put way too much pepper in her soup, so everybody's sneezing. And the chef is like, if everybody minded their own business, the world would spin a lot faster. And then they sing this song to the baby. I don't remember how it goes, but they sing this song to the baby. And then the Duchess has to leave, so she gives Alice the baby. And then Alice has to like tie up the baby to hold it. And she's walking out, and she looks at the baby and is like, you look like a pig. And the baby just like snorts at her. And it's just, what in the world? And then the baby turns into a pig. And then she's walking along, and then there's the Cheshire cat that just like, poof, comes into existence. My goodness. And then he's like, we're all mad here. And then Alice is just like, oh. And then the cat leaves, and the cat comes back and is like, did the baby turn into a pig? And Alice is just like, yeah. And the cat's like, I knew it. I knew it. And then the cat leaves again. And then Alice just goes along, and she crashes this tea party. She just like crashes it. And then she gets all offended, and then she leaves. And she finds herself in the hallway again. And so she like makes herself bigger and she gets the key, but then she makes herself smaller using like the pieces of mushroom, and then she can go into the door. So she goes into the door finally. Then she sees some gardeners who are like playing cards, like from a deck of cards. They're 2, 5, and 7, and they're arguing while painting a rose tree for some reason. Then the queen comes along and she's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And she orders these gardeners to be beheaded, but Alice is like, this is not happening today. So she rolls up the gardeners, because they're playing cards, so you can roll them right up. And she puts them head first into a vase. And then the soldiers go back to the queen, and the queen is like, "Are their heads off?" And the soldiers are like, "We can't even find their heads." And the queen's just like, "Yeah, that's fine." And she asks Alice if she can play croquet. And Alice is like, "Yeah." And so the queen is like, "Come on then." And then she joins the procession. And she finds the white rabbit. And they're like whispering. But 2 seconds later, they get to the croquet ground. And this is a wild... The arches were soldiers that had just like bent over. And the croquet mallets were flamingos and the balls were hedgehogs. Yeah. I don't know what type of sense that makes, but it doesn't make sense. But like they play the game and the Cheshire Cat comes back. But it's just the head of the cat. And the king and the queen are like losing it over having the head of the cat. And Alice is like, "It's the Duchess's cat." So they bring out the Duchess. And the Duchess does nothing about the cat. She's just like, "Oh, and the moral of the story is birds of a feather flock together." And it's, "Duchess, what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you okay?" But, ooh, and she has a sharp chin, and she's like digging it right into Alice's neck, and Alice is like, "Oh, I am so uncomfortable." But the queen comes along and is like, "Duchess, either you or your head must be off in less than no time." So the Duchess like bolts. She's out of there. And so Alice and the queen go back and play croquet. And they finish the game. And by finish, I mean everybody but for the king, queen, and Alice was sentenced to execution. They were all gonna be beheaded. So the queen is like, "Have you met the mock turtle yet?" And Alice is like, "No." So the queen takes Alice to the griffin, and the griffin takes Alice to the mock turtle, and the mock turtle is so depressed. He's like wiping tears off of his eyes with his fins, and he's having a whole breakdown while he's telling her all this stuff. And eventually the griffin tells the mock turtle to sing a song about mock turtle soup. And but before he can finish the song, everybody's like, "The trial is starting." So the griffin and not the mock turtle, the griffin and Alice like go, and they go to court, and the jury can't even spell their own names. Well, they have to write down their names so that they won't forget by the end of the trial. And the trial is about who stole the tarts, but like Alice saw this tarts like 2 seconds ago, and it's just, huh? But eventually they all get mad at Alice, and then Alice starts to grow again. And and all of the soldiers starts to like throw themselves at Alice, like how people throw cards, you know? You know what I mean. I know you know what I mean. Like they were throwing themselves at Alice. But then Alice wakes up and she tells her sister all about it. And it was this dream that she had. And she's just listening to all the noises and stuff. And she's like, that was nice. And it's just, this was a wild story. Like, people need to be watching Alice in her sleep. Like, her big sister needs to watch her a little bit more, because she's just like, Alice is wild. If I ever met Alice, I would lose it. I would put pepper in her soup. I would Alice is